First up is Laura Amico. She's founder, CEO, editor of Homicide Watch. In 2013, she was a Neiman Berkman Fellow at Harvard, and she's a California dreamer that grew up in Sonoma County. So, Laura, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I've never been introduced by my Twitter profile before. It reminds me that I'm probably due for an update. I'm 5 years into Homicide Watch, which is, for me, really hard to believe. We're a family business. My husband and I started Homicide Watch together. And because of that, a lot of people describe Homicide Watch as our baby, right? We spend all of our time nurturing this site, nurturing this business, making sure it's growing. Which means that if Homicide Watch is 5 years old, it's in kindergarten right now, which is really hard to believe. The other thing I think about is that 1 year in startup life is sort of like 3 years in regular life, right? So actually, when I look at Homicide Watch, this is 15 years of this child. And we've seen a lot of changes. And we've watched Homicide Watch grow and pivot and become different people in those years. And that's been really fun. In fact, it's been the best thing that I have ever done in my life. The Sunlight Foundation, a couple years ago, 2 years ago, put together a really nice video of what exactly it was that we were doing in 2012. And I'd like to show you that video. It's pretty quick here because it shows you where we were 2 years ago, what my day-to-day life was like, and where we saw our business. Oh, we don't have the video now. Okay, just a second. So that's me at the courthouse. And that was what I was doing for the first 2 years of Homicide Watch. I moved to D.C. as an unemployed crime reporter. I'd been a crime reporter at the Press-Democrat in Santa Rosa. Is it up and running now? I'll start in just a second. And this is how I spent my days. Homicide Watch is a website, homicidewatch.org, that covers every homicide in DC from the initial crime report through prosecution and sentencing. It's powered by a database, but the heart of it is really a reported blog where I do most of the reporting. I'm in court nearly every day, following cases, tracking them through the system. We're both from the newsroom. Originally, I had been a crime reporter in California. I really loved what I was doing and wanted to do it here. Unfortunately, no one was hiring crime reporters in DC. Part of the reason we started the site is because I had this sense that the conversation that we were having about violent crime wasn't complete, because we didn't know really who was being killed, where they were being killed, and what was happening afterwards.
A lot of what we try to do is, with the site in general and with documents in particular, is take things that are technically public and make them more accessible, more usable, and more meaningful.
My approach, I like to say, is open notebook. Anything that I have while I'm covering a case should be online. If it's important to me, it's going to be important to people following the case.
We have a searchable database of every court document that we collect.
I've learned that the typical news cycle of a story doesn't really suit the purpose of covering crime very well, because people come back to crime stories sort of on their own time and for different emotional reasons.
We know that people come back to the site and they follow a case from start to finish, from arrest to indictment to trial.
So one Saturday morning I woke up, and part of my news checks is to check my analytics, and I saw a search for killing of Jamal in DC, October 8th, 2011, and I saw a man was murdered on Quincy Street. So I started pulling together this information and saying, okay, Jamal, Quincy Street shooting. I took those search terms to Facebook and to Twitter and was able to identify the victim in that case. What I've realized, though, is that the point of being first isn't necessarily because we're in competition with other media. The point is that friends of Jamal were looking for information. They were looking for a place to go. They were looking to share their experiences and feelings. By having the information quickly, we created a place for them to go and react when they wanted to react, which was immediately and not 48 hours later. I had one letter recently from a woman who said, "It felt like my father's death didn't matter until I finally saw his photo on Homicide Watch. And then I knew that people more than just me cared." Some of the best moments working on the site happen when I see family members of one victim reaching out to family members of another victim. And being able to have created a place for that to happen is a really good feeling. So that's where we were in 2012. And as I said, 2012 is a really long time ago in startup years. At that point, we had one website, Homicide Watch D.C., and it was a reported blog tied to a database that allowed us to create these victim pages and suspect pages that added context over time to the narrative of crime in D.C. And what that allowed was people to ask and answer questions about how the criminal justice system was working, and more importantly, how they wanted to see it work. We solved the editorial problem of reporting homicides. We were able to do 100% of homicides in DC from crime to conviction with one person. Now, we solved the editorial side by solving the technical side. We built software around this process that made the reporter more effective and more efficient. What we hadn't solved at this point was the business side. And that was the third leg of the stool that we really struggled with. The question was, how do you pay for this? The answer is for us that we were paying for it ourselves. We were bootstrapped from day one with zero funding. We put our savings and our time and any budget that we had for going out or going on vacation into Homicide Watch, because it was a project that we believed in, not just for the journalism of it, but for the community of it. Now, what happened was that others started watching what we were doing, and the community responded as well. From when this video was filmed in 2012 to now, our audience, which we were still very proud of then, has doubled to 650,000 monthly page views and 70,000 unique visitors. I will remind you, this is with one reporter covering 100% of homicides in DC. The other thing that's changed is that we've moved into a student reporting lab model. When I received the Neiman Berkman Fellowship, I had to leave DC. And because we didn't have any money coming in, I wasn't able to pay anyone to take my place, which essentially meant that the site was going to die. We ran a Kickstarter campaign with help from a lot of friends, many in this room, thank you. We raised $47,000, and that went to paying student interns to take over the work that I was doing. Now, what we've seen is that they are better at that work than I ever was. And that part of the reason for that is because they have that strong software support to guide them through the process of what they need to do in order to cover homicides efficiently, effectively, and the value that they bring creatively. This has allowed us room to expand, not just to other cities, but other beats. We now work with newsrooms like the Sun-Times and the Trentonian to do Homicide Watch with them in Chicago and Trenton, New Jersey. We cover gun deaths in Colorado with the University of Colorado Boulder. Northeastern University is about to launch Homicide Watch Boston, and I'm actually teaching a class at Northeastern to students around these principles of structured beat reporting. We're working with WBUR, thanks to a grant from the Knight Foundation and the Boston Foundation, to apply the concepts of structured beat reporting to covering education reform in Massachusetts. Now, all of this has happened in 5 years. Like I said, it feels like 15. We've been really busy, but we also think a lot about where do we want to be 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 1 year from now. We want to continue growing through our licensing partnerships. We want to promote more structured journalism work. Journalism that takes the daily beat reporting, that gives reporters the tools to be more effective and more efficient, that allows them to pull data and context out of what they're doing anyways, and then make maximum use of that and make it available to the community in ways that the community can understand, use, and further. Finally, I love working with students. And one thing that I really want to do in the next years with Homicide Watch is to develop more student reporting labs in more cities so we can get young journalists into newsrooms as good crime reporters, and not just good crime reporters, but reporters who have connections to the community, who know how to look through their analytics to look at what the community is looking for, who know how to respond to comments, who know how to moderate comments, who know how to go to court and introduce themselves and say, I'm here when you have something to say. Let me tell you the many ways you can participate in my coverage. And that's what we do in DC. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate everything that everyone has done for us in those 5 years. And I'm going to leave you just with a couple tips, things that I wish I'd known. First is that this was a long-term commitment. When we started, I thought, maybe I'll give it 6 months and see where we are then. And so being here today is really special. I also didn't know how hard this journey would be. And so having people along that journey with me has been more important than I'd ever known. That I'd have to be more creative than I could ever imagine. I started this as a beat reporter with my scanner and my notebook and my camera, running out of the newsroom in my hiking boots every 5 minutes to cover the latest story. And here we are today. Finally, that I would never, ever, ever regret trying. I told you a couple minutes ago that this was the best thing that I've ever done, and it is. And I can't imagine doing journalism in any other way right now. Check back with me a year from now, 2 years from now, and I will still be as proud, even though we might be doing this slightly differently. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from other panelists.